So she may be subject to pressures, but contrary to those pressures, she's a mother. She has a baby, right? I mean, there are women who will risk their lives to save their babies. This is the normal, natural thing for a mother to do. So no matter how much pressure a woman may suffer from influences in her on her life to abort that baby, her obligation is to protect that baby as the baby's mother, right? And it is totally unnatural and anti-natural for her to not only seek the baby's death, but also to succumb to pressures from others who want the baby dead. If she has a spouse or a boyfriend who's pressuring her into putting the baby to death, is that an excuse for her to go ahead and do it? Say, well, my boyfriend pressured me into killing my baby, so I did. You know, take that to a court of law for a woman who has a little child, born, an infant, and the boyfriend kills the child, and the mother is colluding in that. You know, what do we do in a case like that? Do we excuse the mother for her part in the killing of the child? Absolutely not. So why would we do this before a child is born? And the mother's collusion in the death of the child, no matter what pressure may be brought to bear on her, when her natural obligation before God is to protect the child's life. So no, the women also need to be held accountable for giving that life and then being the principal agent in deciding the child's death, determining the child's death, calling for the child's death. Because of all the people involved, they're the one person ultimately who could stop this entirely and say, no, you're not going to kill my baby. Mm-hmm. And she doesn't do that. Yes, there should be penalties for all those involved. And in the sense of moral theology and the responsibility, the woman bears the first responsibility for that child's life. Mm-hmm. And yes, there should be penalties for that. Women should know that. Now, modern day bleeding hearts cry bloody murder over this. They say, oh, the woman is the victim, the woman is the victim. But you know something? The fact is that 99.9% of the children so conceived are willingly are the result of willing cooperation of the woman, you know, in the very conception of the child. And so, you know, the idea that of all the people involved, the women should have no responsibility because, after all, I mean, it's hard being a mom, right? That doesn't fly. It's morally wrong, and it's at the root of the problem. It's a failure to accept or face the fact of what abortion really is. Mm-hmm. The direct murder of an innocent life. And ultimately, at the behest of the mother. That it is a horrible crime before God, and it should be before man too. What it does is it cheapens the human life of everyone. Essentially denies the human soul, created in the image of God and destined by the likeness of God and grace to have everlasting life. Abortion is a direct attack on that whole belief, the whole understanding of what human life is worth. If the child's life in the womb is something considered so cheap, then it cheapens every life, and it basically leads to all the other evils. All the other evils follow from that premise that abortion is legal, or even moral, as some would like to have it. Just recently, we had the head of the Fed, was it, former or present, say that abortion is good for the economy. Well, it's certainly good for the pockets of the abortionists, right? It's good for Planned Parenthood, right? In terms of their bottom line, there's no doubt about it. But you're killing the workforce. The idea that it's good for the economy is really sick. I mean, you'd have to be a dyed-in-the-wool totalitarian atheist to think that justifies this. I mean, Stalin killed millions of people. Mao Zedong boasted that millions and millions of people died for the glory of communism. And that's supposed to justify, like, that's okay, you know, because there's an economic benefit from it. You'd have to be a total Marxist to say that. And then there's somebody else, who was it, who came out recently and said that abortion cuts the crime rate. Well, children who are aborted come from families that might well already be in trouble. And they found that there is a very high representation among criminals for children who come from broken families, right? So the idea is, well, let's kill the babies of these families and we'll cut down the crime rate. Now, who in his right mind would say such a thing, right? Nowadays, I suppose people would say these things. It doesn't mean them in the right mind. They find a lot of people who would agree with them. Say, oh, it's a good argument. Yes, let's kill them first, lest they become criminals. Okay? It's a mortal sin. It makes the person who does it a criminal. makes the person who does it a murderer in the eyes of God, and it should be in the eyes of the law. So very, very few people argue that the child's life in the womb is not a human life. Very few people are left to argue that point, because it's just so, it's patently obvious now in the light of our scientific instrumentation, our science, everything we know indicates that this is a human life in the womb. That's the whole point of their terminating the life of the child, because it is a human life. And if that human life is allowed to be born, they will be responsible for it. That's the whole point. They don't want the responsibility, so they are compelled in their own minds to destroy that child's life before they're legally responsible for it. And so the fact is, Tom, I mean, we have a monstrous crime being spoken of and almost glorified by the left, notably the Democrats, whose entire power base rests basically on abortion. Let's face it. I mean, of all the issues that have become the hallmark of the Democrats, their power base, their go-to pitch is their defense of so-called abortion rights, right? They're upholding abortion rights. The Democratic Party is the party of abortion. And they glory in it, they wallow in it, and as St. Paul says, they glory in what they should be ashamed of, right? They applaud it, even in the New York State Legislature, applauding themselves for voting abortion up to the moment of birth, right? They applaud themselves for that. Yeah. Well, I fear they'll all be applauding themselves in hell. So, you know, I'm sure the devil is in hell applauded them too for that. Yeah. But what kind of depravity, what kind of a perverted individual would applaud that? Would applaud themselves for it, you know? Would boast of it. It's incredible, just incredible. But yes, we've come to that here in the United States of America, 2022. We've come to that. Hopefully, the Supreme Court will begin to try to make amends for the travesty that was Roe versus Wade. And even as a matter of law, let alone morality, we'll see. But you see how the abortionists howl like the possessed at the idea of having their abortion rights rescinded, as it were, right, on the federal level. And how they're also claiming that if those so-called abortion rights are taken away on the federal level, this endangers all the other rights that they've so-called gained in the years following, rights of every perversion under the sun. It all goes back to that human life is reduced to simply a commodity, nothing more.